Good morning and welcome to Short on Time. This week we're reading a story from I Thought My Father Was God, edited and introduced by Paul Auster. And this particular story, My Mistake, was written by Ludlow Perry from Dayton, Ohio. I was driving day shifts for a yellow cab company in Dayton, making a meager hourly wage. It was the summer of 1966. The summer was in the grip of a heat wave and everyone was irritable, including me. On this afternoon, I was sitting in a downtown cab stand in front of the Biltmore Hotel, a large, elegant place that was just slightly past its prime. I had all the windows rolled down to catch any slight breeze in the still air. I was hoping to get an airport run. Instead, I got a call from the dispatcher. Over the radio, he told me to go to Wilkie's newsstand and buy a racing gazette. Then I was to stop at the Liberal Market downtown and pick up 6 bottles of Schönling beer, a small shaker of goldfish food, and a box of White Owl cigars. No substitutions were permitted, and I was to use my own cash to pay for the goods. The customer would reimburse me, so I was to save the receipts. He then directed me to deliver the goods to apartment 3B at an address on 3rd Street, which I recognized as an apartment building in a deteriorating neighborhood. I protested, not wanting to lose the chance for an airport run, but also not wanting to lay out money from my own cash supply because I was afraid I might not be able to collect, or worse, that I was getting set up for a robbery. The dispatcher, now growing impatient with me, told me that this man was a regular customer, that there would be no problem with payment, and that I should get moving or bring the cab back in to someone who would. Since he put it that way, I got moving. Privately, though, I cursed the customer. I figured he must be some kind of welfare bum who was too lazy to feed his own goldfish and to procure what he needed to satisfy his own vices. It infuriated me to run these errands for someone who, judging from where he lived, couldn't possibly have enough money to pay me. I drove to Wilkie's, bought the racing gazette, then down the street to Liberals for the goldfish food, beer, and cigars. Then I drove up to the customer's address. It was an old 1890s 4-story dark brick apartment building in nearly livable condition. I entered, smelling the stale tobacco smoke, bacon, and mildew that are always present in such places. When I reached the 3rd floor hallway, I knocked on the dark hardwood door of apartment 3B. There was no immediate answer I could hear, but something was moving across the floor. It wasn't footsteps. Finally, the door opened and I saw no one. No one, that is, until I looked down. There, sitting on a small plywood platform and looking up at me, was a man. He had a slight build and thinning black hair, and he was wearing a white t-shirt and gray wool pants with a thin black belt at the waist. He had only stubs for He had only stubs for legs, about as long as my hands. He was a double amputee who moved about his one-room apartment by propelling himself on a small platform across the bare wood floor. He held a rubber cylinder in each hand to push himself along. They were almost as big as mallet heads, with rubber rings on top for handholds. The man was polite and very grateful for my services. He directed me to put the beer in a small Frigidaire, a relic of the late 1940s, and to leave the cigars on the kitchenette table. The goldfish were in a bowl there, and he asked me to feed them. Then he asked me to put the racing gazette on an old glass coffee table in front of the worn couch. I did everything he asked gladly. I wasn't feeling irritable anymore. When I set the racing gazette down on the coffee table, I noticed an open velvet case that looked like a jewelry box. As the man rolled over and reached for the money he was going to pay me with, I looked inside the box. Inside was a slightly tarnished medal, a Purple Heart. It was almost certainly from World War II, since the man seemed to be in his mid-50s. Guilt began to creep over me as the man paid me for all the supplies and the cab fare. Then the guilt settled in when he gave me a generous tip, much more than I would have had from any airport run. The man was a quiet sort of person, obviously not in need of companionship. Once our business was done, he showed me out. He had long ago reconciled himself to his condition and to the sacrifice he had made. He had no use for sympathy and didn't offer any explanations. I would make that run many more times until I moved on, but I never learned the man's name and we never became friends in spite of our regular contact. Unfortunately for me, I would be more than twice the age I was then before I learned that prejudging people makes one wrong about most things most of the time. Thank you, Ludlow Perry from Dayton, Ohio. See you tomorrow.